security guard at Marine Barracks, London, an infantryman, and later as a drill instructor at Parris Island. He deployed during the Gulf War and returned to the Middle East during Operation Iraqi Freedom. His personal awards include the Legion of Merit, Bronze Star, Combat V with 1 Gold Star, the Purple Heart Navy Accommodation Medal with 1 Gold Star, the Navy Achievement Medal with 2 Gold Stars, and a Combat Action Ribbon. Today, he is a senior enlisted advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and a senior non-commissioned officer in the U.S. Armed Forces. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sergeant Major Bryan B.Battaglia to our stage.
Thank you, National Commander, for that very kind introduction. Distinguished guests, veterans from all branches of our armed forces, spouses, family, and friends, good morning to each and every one of you. First, allow me to remark just how much of an honor it is for my wife, Lisa, and I to join you at your annual convention. Let me also say that how grateful I am for the opportunity to serve as our Armed Forces Senior Non-Commissioned Officer. It is truly a distinct honor and privilege in what literally is leading an enlisted force of nearly 2.3 million serving men and women, active, reserve, National Guard, and their families. Now, to remain on a positive soundbite, I can also rejoice that while I have been graciously allotted 20 minutes for remarks this morning, I assure you that I won't take that long. For 2 reasons, really. One, so we stay focused on highlighting our award recipients, and secondly, whenever one can yield back time, I think, to an audience, it certainly builds points in the acceptance ratings. All kidding aside, General Dempsey, our chairman, would have loved to have been here and sends his warm regards. We both pass along to the entire convention how tremendously proud we are of the entire force, those who have so honorably served, those who are serving, those who we have laid to rest, those whom we continue to look for. We also recognize, ladies and gentlemen, that it takes a very special family to endure the sacrifice and hardships, the moves from school to school, from town to town, to shoulder the uncertainty as you all have, waiting for the return of your loved one. The military spouse, military children, very special families indeed, and we hope that each of you all share in our excitement and pride that our military families are the heart and soul of our force. Families are so important, and it takes really some very unique qualities and skills for a family to be together, for a family to stay together. One important attribute that immediately comes to mind is communication. It's a necessity in nearly every function of life. Now, in many ways, we have a habit in the military of comparing ourselves to professional sports teams. And while that's okay, marriage in the military are also very alike. For example, our military has a chain of command. Believe me, a marriage does too. And like the military, a marriage is only going to survive with effective communications. Marriage, military, professional sports. What a trifecta. I'm reminded of a speech that President Reagan was giving once on the importance of communication and how much it plays into what you and I do. He says one day he was told a former place kicker for the Los Angeles Rams, who later became a sports announcer, some of you may know, a guy by the name of Danny Villanueva, was telling President Reagan about communications. Danny said that he had been having dinner over at the home of a young ball player for the Los Angeles Dodgers. His young wife of the ball player was bustling about getting dinner ready. They were talking sports, and the baby started crying. So over her shoulder, the busy wife said to the husband, the ball player, "Change the baby." Now again, he was a young fella, newly married, and a bit embarrassed in front of Danny Villanueva. And so he said, "What do you mean change the baby? I'm a ball player. It's really not my line of work." Now she turned around, put her hands on her hips, reestablished that chain of command, and communicated with absolute clarity. She said, "Look, Buster, you lay the diaper out like a diamond, you put second base on home plate, you put the baby's bottom on the pitcher's mound, you hook up first with third, slide home underneath, and if it starts to rain, the game ain't called. You just start all over again." Well, so with that said, while our families are that heart and soul, our men and women continue to volunteer to serve, to protect our freedoms. And while the downsizing takes place to protect our borders and our homeland, to support and defend our Constitution, to live and operate on the edge, to do our nation's bidding, even times, although wanting to get into it, having to sit on the bench, waiting for a spot, hand held high, saying, "Put me in, coach, put me in." So let me pass a few broad stroke points on the near future of our military, of our force. It's no surprise to anyone here that we're into the longest conflict in our nation's history, and as we have redeployed forces from Iraq and presently and methodically downsized forces in Afghanistan, that's going to cause a restructure and reshaping of our military. We call it Joint Force 2020. And nothing new, as we have after every major conflict, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. This reshaping comes as part of the cycle. But rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, that while our armed forces is going to be leaner today, or leaner tomorrow than it was today, we are going to remain ready, relevant, trained, equipped, and postured to meet any emerging requirement that our President or Secretary of Defense may direct. This reshaping will impact all of our service branches, even our National Guard. And while the downsizing takes place, there is in fact some good news, some build. We're going to increase in our special operations forces, in our cyber defense community. You all know the kind of work our special operators and cyber folks do. And just because we end operations in Iraq and soon Afghanistan doesn't mean that terrorists or other adversaries go away. There's going to remain a demand to eliminate threats. So while you may see reduced footprints in previous populated areas, you will see a little more visibility and focus in others. You see, despite what some would ask us to believe, warfare does fundamentally remain a human endeavor. Technology and its gravitational pull cannot be viewed as a panacea, and so in deterring and defeating our enemy, our military must and will remain leader-centric and yet just technology-enabled. We also face some fiscal challenges. The bill is in fact large. Not our first time being here either. We're developing ways to tighten our belt and use other innovative means to shave redundant costs. From a military perspective now, our national debt reminds us that, as said previously today, freedom is in fact not free. I use that term in the most dignified and honorable context. Keeping our adversaries out of reach, yes, it comes with a monetary cost, but more importantly, it comes with a human cost. The precious lives of our servicemen and women who have gallantly given their all. Let me reassure you that our military will forge through these fiscal challenges, just as we always have. I can remember as a very young troop on the heels of Vietnam that my senior NCOs and officers brought me, as a young whippersnapper, my peer group, through some very difficult times. Very little money to work with, but they and you got us through it. Now it's my turn to maneuver the force through these fiscal barricades, and we are prepared and postured to do just that. As I scan the room, one of the instant optics that hits me is diversity. Such a great thing for our all-volunteer force. We come from all walks of life. We stretch from coast to coast. Literally, there's no crevice of our country left untouched. We attend different schools. We come from different denominations. And in some cases, we're in fact raised beyond the borders of our 54 states and territories. We join different service branches under different contracts with different specialties. Yet, while gravely different, there are many similarities, and one that strikes us this morning is what brings these young warriors to the stage: volunteerism. It's not surprising, rather remarkable as to how over the last 237 years we have grown together as a profession of arms, as our nation's defenders. For many of you, Remember, long ago, upon our enlistment or accession, we all swore or affirmed an oath to support and defend the Constitution. Every one of us, the same identical oath, no difference in its words, equal in its meaning, and think about it. Nowhere else in any civilian profession hired out of a high school classroom would require such a verbal commitment of such magnitude. To swear that we will honorably wear the cloth of our nation, to support and defend our country at all cost. It confirms that this job is more than just a job. It's a calling, isn't it? Life-changing, and that's authenticated by your presence here. Not to shortchange the real reason why I'm up here, and that's to highlight these service members to my left, whom not only volunteered as members of this profession, but also volunteered their spare time and skill beyond their regular duties. It leads me to say how grateful our Department of Defense is for organizations such as the American Legion to recognize the extra efforts of our men and women who extend their volunteerism. I also find it a bit special, everyone, that while today we highlight the aspect of volunteering, it was on this very same day, back in 1945, that President Truman said, "The situation in the Pacific continues to have many elements of danger," and actually urged Congress to continue conscription for a further 2 years. How times have evolved. But despite that evolution, our force remains a loyal, patriotic, and professional brotherhood that society respects and admires. It's an organization that many nations, in fact, envy, due largely because of the hard work that, over the years, many in this room have shaped and paved the way. Our actions, in fact, shape the way our nation perceives our armed forces, and our country must continue to look upon us with the highest of ratings. Just as your Legion motto depicts for God and for country, our armed forces will continue to uphold the standard in everything we represent: trust, honor, leadership, courage, to mention a few. And so, ladies and gentlemen, these 5 service members standing before you, courageous in their actions and compassionate in their hearts, to move along an initiative or a project, to help a person in need, to devote personal time or an effort in hopes of making the world a better place. They humbly stand shoulder to shoulder as proud members of our armed forces. Thank you all for your continued service and sacrifice, and may God continue to bless all of our troops and their families. Thank you.